Roxy Lalonde was introduced on January 15th, 2012, in the webcomic Homestuck. Her introduction page was one of the most iconic, even among her human peers, or the trolls of Hivebent. Pink games consoles, a cat in a tux, a rifle, and an unfettered love for wizards, underscored by a pile of plushies in the corner. The Rogue of Void was an icon from her first appearance. She remains one of, if not the most beloved Alpha Kid, even 8 years later. Everyone loves this funky little wizard fan, but Roxy Lalonde has been in the middle of one of the many post-canon controversies on social media in the past several months, due to her depictions in Homestuck 2 and the epilogues. Why? Let's take a closer look. But first, a disclaimer. I want to make two things abundantly clear. One, this is not an essay for people who believe that Homestuck's various works are too PC, or for those of you who don't like the choices of representation in the works. If that's an opinion you have, you should stop watching, and also you're wrong. Two, this is not a place for argument. If you're particularly passionate about one of the interpretations, this is not the place to have that argument. Thank you. Since the beginning, people have been of the opinion that Roxy Lalonde is trans. Specifically, trans feminine. When I say the beginning, I mean the beginning. On page 4463, before Roxy was even officially revealed, when the last two letters of Roxy's names were revealed, the comic itself referred to the XY in Roxy's name as chromosomal. While this probably was just a pun on Roxy's name, many people in the fandom, particularly on Tumblr, chose to interpret this as literal, as in Roxy was a woman with XY chromosomes, a trans girl. A headcanon like this for Homestuck was not out of place. By this time, Hussey had not shied away from LGBT representation. Kanaya had a crush on Vriska, and was entertaining a crush on Rose at the time. Being a webcomic, the atmosphere about queer identities was less strenuous than most media with a fan following. And while this was about queer relationships, trans issues were similarly comfortable in the fandom. Hussey also has famously said in a now-deleted Twitter post, quote, "Homestuck will eventually reach a gay singularity. Mark it down. It will make Cora look like Republican propaganda." Trans femme Roxy, then, is one of the more consistent and long-standing headcanons in Homestuck's fan community, a community that always has been closer than usual to its creators. This is why, when in the Homestuck epilogues, the character was confirmed to have been a cis woman during Homestuck's events, fans were upset. In the epilogue's two routes, Roxy Lalonde either becomes a mother to a biological child, or decides to explore a non-binary identity, both of which fly in the face of this long-standing fan canon detail that Roxy is trans femme. Many saw this as a betrayal. There were a variety of reactions to this in the coming months, many fueled by vitriol and accusations at the creators, many fueled by angry confusion from non-binary individuals who were upset that people were insisting on calling Roxy feminine pronouns. The creators of Homestuck's post-canon works have insisted on a firm stance, that the works do not have to be canon with respect to the original Homestuck, thus post-canon. Regarding Roxy, I take this to mean that they support any headcanon about the original work, and don't wish to step on the toes of anyone's headcanons therein, thereby creating a sequel where they can do anything they like without fearing the repercussions, much like, and this is particularly in the case for the epilogues, a fanfic. Unfortunately, this has not stopped people who like trans femme Roxy from speaking out. Homestuck 2, whether the creators like it or not, is a sequel, is a continuation that many treat as canon, which means that despite HS2's best efforts, many people feel like their interpretation has been disrespected or invalidated in some way. This notion is hard to challenge, but it's also hard to say that the writers of Homestuck 2 are somehow accountable. It's impossible to know what they knew of the trans femme Roxy headcanon, and it's hard to say that they wrote Roxy the way they did intentionally to treat trans people poorly, especially when so many on their teams are outspoken LGBTQ advocates or trans themselves. Their team has advocated trans rights publicly many times, as well as LGBTQ issues at large. Need I remind you, Hussey's tweets. The answer, then, is somewhat dissatisfying. The reality is that Homestuck 2 has chosen to take a different path with Roxy Lalonde than many fans hoped for. While this is unfortunate, this does not mean that the people who love trans Roxy have to stop loving her. Recently, I spoke to a friend about the issue. He said something very eye-opening about Roxy that I think applies to her themes in Homestuck very appropriately. Quote, "Depending on what the author wants to do with Roxy's gender, in the same sense that void can be said to represent the idea that there is no one true answer to the narrative of a story, there's no one true answer to what gender is Roxy, because Roxy doesn't owe the reader an explanation, or the author can do whatever they want with it. It might not be the most gratifying notion on the surface to say, essentially, that Roxy has no canon gender, and it can be left up to the author of the fan work, but it's a wonderful thought that she could be interpreted so openly. Roxy is a wonderful character that a wide variety of people love, and fostering that love by making her a blank check that can be interpreted any way the reader desires is a happy thought. Another interesting thing to note is Roxy's upbringing. Roxy Lalonde, along with Dirk, was raised like many Homestuck characters in strange circumstances. She was born in the 25th century, a time after the Condes had turned Earth into a mostly water globe, living above the sea in a floating town populated by Carapacians. In her own home growing up, she was an alien, distanced by space and time from her friends, born outside of human culture and its genders. Another comment from a friend, quote, "They basically were assigned a gender at birth without their parents ever having seen their genitals, so their gender was absolutely nothing to do with their body, at least initially. I think a compelling Roxy gender narrative would be more related to how Roxy gets to have an entirely new experience with the concept of gender than most anyone else does, and they can pick and choose what they want to express as a result of that. More than anything, I think Roxy's gender and the discussion surrounding it is a testament to both how passionate people can be about their identity as well as the flexibility of it. The greatest takeaway here, then, is not to quash the passion others feel about a character, and not to lose your love of a character because they are interpreted differently by someone else, even the canonical continuations authors. So in sum, if nothing else, just understand this. Roxy Lalonde, best Homestuck. Thanks for listening.